and thanks for joining us today. You're listening to the Women's Broadcast Television Expert Spotlight Show, and I'm your host, Shavon. WBTVN is the all-women's internet television station with content that's created by women and for women. And joining us today is a great guest. You're going to love all the things that he has to say. So let me tell you just a little bit about him. Jason Getz is a great books scholar, historian, award-winning author, and educationer who has written over 13 books, including The Bubble Boys and The Decline of the Epic. Please help me to welcome him onto the show. So welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me, Shay.
I mean, 13 books? That's not like one or two or three.
No, it's something I've been working at for a lot of years.
So more importantly, to start out with, I just want to get the audience to really get to know you. So
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about growing up. What was that like? And what actually got you to where you are today?
All right. Well, I come from a very interesting background. My family is in a range of fields. My grandfather was an advertising executive. He came up with the Frosted Flakes, They're Great, and the Got Milk commercial campaigns. My
Those are
uncle,
big.
yeah, big
Those are
campaign.
really big.
Also, the man
Everybody
from
knows
Glad
those. Yeah.
and Schlitz beer.
Mhm.
So he had some really big ones. My uncle, his son, was the chief engineer of the NASA International Space Station. My father created the first online law school, and my mother was a judge for many years. Now she's retired and working as a professional mediator. So my family background was very interesting. I'd go to family events and I'd have this range of people around, and I'd hear all sorts of different stuff about what they were doing at work and what their lives were at home, obviously, but more just a fascinating range of ideas. And I guess to fast forward to what got me interested in the great books, when I turned 15 for my 15th birthday, my grandfather got me two big boxes of the Great Books of the Western World, the 1953 Encyclopedia Britannica set, and the Gateway to the Great Books, which I think was 1960, which was a supplement to that. So I wake up my 15th birthday, and there's these massive boxes that even I, at 6'3" and 270 at the time, couldn't carry. And somehow we managed to get them in the house, and I start to look at them and I'm like, oh my God. It's a treasure for all time. So
The knowledge and everything was unbelievable for you.
massive amounts of information. Now, at the time, I wasn't really reading. I'd been put off by the stuff they were having me read actually in middle school,
Okay.
and I stopped reading. And when you stop reading, in order to start it again, you have to really throw it into gear. It's like a muscle not being used.
Yes.
And so it took me a while. I mean, they sat on my shelf for 5 or 6 years. I went to Berkeley, I came back, and all of a sudden, I started reading them. And I was floored by not the amount of information, the factual information, which itself is amazing, but the analytical tools for processing the world that these authors had, and their way of explaining things and making you as an author see things with them, or as a reader see things with them. So that's where my love for the great books began, probably when I was about 20.
Wow. So I want to go back just a little bit, and that is, you talked about your family.
Yeah.
And your father was an educational wizard, basically. I mean, and you must have felt like when you were younger, going to events, and like you said, you had all these people around you. They were celebrities in their own way.
Yeah, well, and my aunt Dana was an actress. She was actually a celebrity. She took me to Hollywood Stars Night when I was 5, and I got to go on the field and meet Mike Piazza. So,
what an experience that was.
Yeah, I don't remember much of it. I remember Dana was an amazing human being, type 1 diabetic, and passed very young. That was before we had the tools to treat it. But yeah, no, each of these family members was in their own way important in their field. And I don't think I really focused on their celebrity status. That wasn't for me any part of it, but it was just the access to information coming from them that no amount of college degree or college degrees can make up for what you hear in those conversations at home.
Right. We could have a whole conversation on, and I think colleges do a great job with certain kinds of education. I want to get that it's there. But the other side of it, it doesn't teach us about living life.
Right.
The real tools that we really need to be an entrepreneur, to be an author, to be some of the things that, just they don't even take into consideration that maybe you have that talent or that dream.
Right.
And you don't even have a chance to really, even get it exposed because you don't know how to go about it.
College has changed over the years. They used to do a better job of this, and as it's gotten more bureaucratic and more about piling up units, they've gotten less about the individual's needs as a student or desires as a student.
So what are they really concentrating on then, Jason? What do you think?
Well, what are they concentrating on now, or?
No, what do you think when you say that they don't do that? Because I agree with you, by the way. But what I'm trying
what are they concentrating on now?
What is their concentration really on, and how are they going about that?
Well, that's an issue. I don't think they really have a concentration. There's an issue with focus.
Gotcha.
They talk about educating and they talk about teaching, but you talk to more and more college grads and you find that they know less and less. And where it's really showing up is the teachers who are coming out from colleges. They all have to have a teaching credential, but they don't know a whole lot, and that gets passed on to the next generation of students. So we've actually got a big issue. I took the teaching credential major, liberal studies. Obviously, for me, that was for the writing, the whole broad range of topics and ideas. But I was looking at what was going on in the classroom, that these people are going to be teachers, and I was disgusted, to say the least.
Really?
It was bad. It was really bad.
Did you just feel that they, was it because the standards weren't as high as they should be, and therefore the education wasn't there?
That was part of it. Part of it was there's an indoctrination. There's only one side of the political spectrum really being expressed in classrooms, and whether you agree with it or not is immaterial. It's the idea that you should be having different sets of ideas taught to students. And also some of the coursework was hogwash. It was, the teachers would show up, they didn't have anything substantive to teach. I remember there was one class I took, a junior seminar for my major, and I looked at the material they were teaching and I said, "What is this?" I showed it to my father and he looked at it, he said, "What the bleep is this?" I showed it to my mother. She looked at it, she said, "What the bleep is this?" And they're actually teaching this in a college classroom as though it's something that's meant to be processed and analyzed and digested. And there's so much out there that's actually there to teach, and they're substituting it with this stuff.
Yeah.
How do you seriously stay with a straight face? We're trying to educate when you're doing that.
Well, you can't if you don't have the content, and it's not going to be something that isn't new and exciting.
Yeah.
And more importantly, something that you can apply, later on in life,
That's part of it. I think there's something about this where one thing that I heard a lot in college was these books are written by dead white males. They're saying stuff like this. And the reality is the race of the author has nothing to do with what he's writing. Not all white people agreed on everything.
Anyway. Right?
Yeah, it has nothing to do.
It has nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with the price of tea in China. And when they're saying this, they're also casting in with these some not white authors. So they don't really know what they're talking about. They're just using it to push a political agenda. And my goal in life is to go and undo this and to get them back to teaching substantive material, not just at the college level.
And not so much to focus on a political side of anyone.
It doesn't matter what the political...
Or anything, because it doesn't make any difference. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But you've got groups out there and more colleges than ever before being heard from as far as getting away with political remarks within the classroom and nothing being done about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, nothing's done about it, because they want to bring people of like-minded together. And that's not what college is about.
Right.
So why don't we just homeschool all the college kids that don't have that agenda?
Right.
What the colleges, maybe they won't get the same grants because pulling enough students in. I mean, there's all kinds of ways, and they're friendly ways, and they're, just using your intelligence. Think about what can you really do for your kids or for someone who's not fitting into what that looks like at school, that political side of it, and doesn't need to fit into it. That's what makes America what it is having different opinions and being an individual.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that what we really need to do is get back to, forget about this institutional education. There's so much focus on the institution that you get your degree from or your diploma from. There's so much focus on this piece of paper. I don't think any HR specialist has ever been to all the schools whose pieces of paper they're taking at face value.
I agree.
And if you haven't walked through the doors of those schools, or, even if you've done the best research you can possibly do, you have no idea what you're receiving from them. So there's more and more focus on these degrees. There's less and less focus on practical learning, not just in terms of vocational training. That's something they're actually doing a fairly good job at as more and more businesses use the university system as a training ground instead of for intellectual enlightenment. But there's this unfortunate focus on the piece of paper and institutional learning and very little focus on individual learning and focusing on you as an individual getting the most out of your life and your experiences. And that's something that really needs to be worked on.
And giving you the tools that are necessary so that you can do that, because that's really what it's all about. And
that's really what I'm trying to do with the Idols of History series. It's getting people individually their education. They can go through this series. You can pick it up when you're 14 and you can read it the first time and get something out of it. And then as your experience base expands, you can read them again and again and get more wisdom out of it, which is really what the great books are.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say that makes so much sense to me, because when you're reading something when you're 12 or 14 and you go back and you read it again, there are things in there that you didn't get.
For good books, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again at another time. Now, not all books can do that for you, keep your interest in.
Right.
And so you're a great writer and you're thinking about these things, and how do you pull these people back in at different ages in their life so that there's value in it to be able to be compounded.
Yeah.
You've already learned to really what all of the things are in there that you really want them to get.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, and I love that. I just love that, because I think it's so important. That's education.
Yeah.
Book. That's really what you're talking about. That's entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Ahead of it. So let's go and talk about your first book.
The first one or this one?
No, the very first one that you did, Bubble Boy.
Okay.
So, we had a little bit of a chance to talk before the interview, and we talked about it, and you said, not my best, but good. And I think I just really want to say this. I think that we're all critical when we get better with something.
Yeah.
Even more critical with what we might have done.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say it's a great book.
It was okay. As I look back on it now, as a writer, as you get older, you learn how to express things more clearly. And at the time, I was in love with the historical style of Edward Gibbon, which is very long and very convoluted.
Very.
Gibbon is fantastic.
Very on.
Yeah, Gibbon is my favorite. I mean, he's absolutely my favorite. But there are times when even he uses words without thinking about what they actually mean. And when I wrote it, I was too focused on the style and not focused enough on clarity of expression and how to build up a case like a lawyer, fact by fact by fact, exactly. And then hammer it home.
That's why they make good writers, a lot of them. And
right.
Not necessarily that they publish, right?
Right.
But they win their case.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing that I've learned about writing is it's the facts come first. what we're teaching in schools now is a little bit different. They're teaching them to put the thesis first, put the argument first, and then justify it with facts. That's not how you do it. And so I was probably partially infused with that as well. Okay. But now as I look back, yes, the material in there is good. It is not a worthless book. It's very much worthwhile. Yeah. But I could have done so much more with it. And at 29 now instead of 22 when I wrote it, I look back and I think, God, if I had taken a little more time and, if I knew what I know now, I could have written this and really made something of it.
Right. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't redo.
Right.
And that you won't have that opportunity to do that. But I think that what you're saying is so spot on with the concept that, what you knew to put in there at that age was what your level of education and communication.
Yeah.
For those two things. Yeah. And now, and you're going to say that, 10 years from now, maybe with even some of the other stuff that is even, that you really consider great now, and maybe always great. But we always have a way of looking about, where we are today and the lessons that we've learned and wanting so badly to be able to go back in time.
Redo what we did before.
Because we have so much more knowledge to do that. So absolutely. I'm just sharing that with you because you don't need to do that.
Right.
What you need to do is write that next book that maybe refers to something that you think that was left out.
And that's
want to make a difference on.
That's what I'm doing with the Idols of History. The Idols of History encompasses everything. It's got the actual history, but it also has lessons from today's world. It brings it to life because history is a living subject. So now I'm going back in the one I'm writing right now, which is on the British Enlightenment. I'm looking at education as a process because that was a big deal. I'm looking between 1689 and 1789. Right. And there are a lot of educational tracts. One of them is John Locke's Thoughts Concerning Education. One of them is Jonathan Swift's essay on modern education. One of them is Gibbon's memoir. There's a lot of different pieces to it. And so I'm looking back, and now I'm going back and I'm stating this in a more organized form and making the suggestions for education that I know now more than I did at the time. But at the time, it made sense given what I knew at the time.
Right, exactly. And so that's what's reflected in the book when we write.
Right.
Yes, I've done the same thing that you have a little bit with my book too. So anyway, how many is in the series?
When I first started writing it, I thought it was going to be 10 to 12. I'm going to try and keep it to that many, but as I'm reading and doing more research, I'm finding that there's more and more that I need to write. It may wind up being 14 or 15 volumes.
Right. And just give yourself that space to do it because the knowledge is there to do it.
Yeah, there's tons.
Yeah, if you ran out of, okay, I'm really happy with what I put out there because, it covers everything that I wanted to cover. But then as you do your educational, research and whatever, there's more that's going to come into mind for you because it's new material that you're covering all the time. Yeah. And I think that it doesn't make any difference how many books that it really ends up to be. It's okay.
The thing with it is I want to keep it accessible. So I don't want it being this massive, massive, massive set because I don't want readers to say, okay, well, I've already read 4 of them and I don't want to have to read another 10 of them. But there's a part of me, because it's covering modern European history from the High Renaissance to the Cold War,
right?
And because I'm trying to localize it and isolate the spots where it's really important. So like in the High Renaissance Italy book, which is on Amazon, that's the one that I just released, I focus specifically on Florence and Milan between 1453 and 1528, because that's really where the High Renaissance occurs. It's not a Roman movement. It's not an artistic movement as is taught in schools. It's really a Florentine and Milanese movement, Northern Italy, and it's a 75-year period. And I'm finding that as I write these volumes, they've got to focus on 75 to 100-year periods in order to really bring out the themes of history.
Right, exactly.
Concentrate the effort on specific locations. So specifically, I might focus on a region within France that's the driver of the French Enlightenment when I get there. Or I may focus on Edinburgh when I'm dealing with the Scottish Enlightenment. Or, so I have to be very careful. There's so many pieces to this. It's finding the source material. It's organizing it. It's reading it and doing the research. It's coming up with something original and innovative to say in them without abusing the prerogative of being original and innovative.
Right.
And I'm trying to make these a center for all of our culture. So I'm using movie references. I'm using song references. And I'm putting them in there so that when people read these, they can be binded into a common culture. If I can get the schools to buy into this and to use them to educate the kids in history, we're going to have a common culture unlike what we've had in the last 40 or 50 years. And I think that's really important.
Well, what's really important is that there's you out there, Jason, that's thinking about all of these things to bring education together on a universal, platform, so that there is some kind of consistency in what's being taught.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said if I can get these into every high school in the country, we'll be a much better society than we are right now, because we've got a lot of problems. And if I can get them not only that, but also turned into documentary TV series, which teachers can assign as homework, for 10 weeks out of the year, 1 day a week, then I can really make a change for the better.
Absolutely. And you are. Just know that you are. Doesn't always come when you want it to come. It takes time.
It takes a little bit of time.
And a lot of people doing reading, and reading your books and doing that. But you've actually worked with professionals, actors and actresses and university heads and high-ranking high school executives and with corporate executives. And I'm sure that you've enjoyed that. But here's what my question is. What did you learn by doing that? How much more need there was?
I've learned just how busy people are, I guess.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think one of the big issues I'm confronting, especially when writing these books and trying to get the word out there, is that people are so busy and feel so pressed for time that they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And in essence, a lot of our social problems stem from that. I always advocate for every kid and every adult to get into a habit of reading for half an hour every day or 30 pages a day, every day. Do it before bedtime. 30 pages of something substantive. And over time, it accumulates. Your knowledge level accumulates. It's not that these people aren't good people and aren't very good at their crafts, but I wonder if not only would their skills be expanded, but also their ability to not just do what they do well, but do good for others wouldn't be enhanced by a little bit of extra reflection time.
Yeah, no question about that. But so what you need to do is to think about how do you get people to, the movement, and we call this a movement, combining getting up and moving their bodies, so that they are not sedentary, because it's almost the number one, other than cigarette smoking, as far as death is concerned. Killing our young people too. How do you combine that? Because I love that idea. I think it should be a must in every family. How do you get them to, put a movement together that parents are really buying into, that says, for a half hour, here's what you're going to do, because you can't rely upon the colleges to do that, or the schools to do that. They can give them the homework to do it or whatever, but truly the influencers in this is, it's really about the influencers, and so it's going to be the parents. And if the parents don't set aside time to oversee it, not just to tell them go do it and they come back and say they did, but to oversee it, like really taking an interest in it because they care, and being able to answer the questions about why should I, when I don't want to. And some kids just read easier than other kids. And some of them, it's more of a challenge for them.
Yeah.
And so, but it doesn't mean that because of that, it's actually gives you more purpose in having them do that.
Yeah, well, I'm a radical in many ways. I'm very reasonable, but I'm also a radical, I think, because the mainstream isn't quite as reasonable as it should be. And one thing I really advocate for is we're going to have to legislate out cell phone use among kids. Because until we get rid of those, we're never going to be able to make sure our kids spend time reading. It's like being on crack cocaine. You've got these things, you can pull them out and play games and text your friends and watch videos. And as a parent, you have no idea what videos your kid's watching, really. Even if you can check their phone a million times, the kids are going to be more creative. They're going to figure out a way to delete their browsing history.
They're pretty smart kids, aren't they?
Of course. And you have to assume that they're going to emulate the adults. And if the adults are spending a lot of time on their phone, they're going to do the same thing.
You hit the nail on the head, because this is it. We do have parents that are saying, you can't be on the electronics all the time or whatever. And even if they're helping them with their homework or doing something with them, they're texting at the same time.
Yeah.
What message do they honestly feel that they're getting across? Like, they know they shouldn't be on it that much, but then kids are always going to watch what you do more than what you say.
Right. That's something that John Locke harps on a lot in Thoughts Concerning Education, is that kids learn by example, not by speech.
No, not by any words that are coming up. They don't even hear you.
No.
They're only going to look at you and see what you're doing and what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's craziness. So you've got to be that person that, why don't we sit down? We'll take a half hour. I'm going to read my book next to you. You read yours. We can talk about it for, 5 minutes afterwards. I mean, what great education, but what great relationships that you're building.
Right.
All the things that you want to have. There's no question about it. You want it. But do you put the right kind of time and discipline into actually getting it?
Right. Well, another thing is I think parents and children can sit together and read a good book, the same good book, not separately, but read it together. Mm-hmm. And that would help a lot. I've always advocated, I've been trying for years, but without much interest, to get a great books program going, to have every kid reading a great book or a fraction of a great book, depending on how long it is, a week. Right. And for the parents, if it made it easier, I would allow the parents to sit with the kids in the great books program and do the same reading, because they need it as much now as the kids do.
Yeah.
And it's something that's going to have to be worked on, and people are going to have to commit to it, and they're going to have to forget about themselves and their own ambitions and their own immediate whims for a little bit. But it's something that needs to be done. Absolutely.
Well, I so totally agree with you. And there has to be something other than the excuse, I don't have time.
Yeah.
You don't have time not to do it, to be really honest with you.
You have to make time.
You have to make the time.
It's like everything in life. If I don't really have time to go play basketball with all the research I'm doing. I have to make that time to go and play.
Exactly.
I don't have
exercise. You need to do something and get away from what you're doing,
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, is I think the exercise is going to be the parents' responsibility. We should not be forcing these schools to put in a physical education class. It does nothing.
That's interesting. I agree with that.
Any good parent will put their kid in the sports league when they're very young, and the kids will fall in love with it.
Exactly.
My parents put me into
or they should fall in love with it.
They should, or if they don't, you figure out some other form of exercise that gets them out.
Whether it's dancing for girls or different things like that for different people. We don't all fit into that same thing, but there's always something that you can figure out. And if you don't figure it out, you just force it.
Yeah. Well, the schools shouldn't be making up for bad parenting. That it shouldn't be the school's job. And as they're increasingly trying to do this or being forced by politicians to do it, we're having greater issues. Okay. Now, it's how do you get the parents to recognize this? That's one of the biggest issues. But at some point, it's going to require legislation, because there's no way around what we're seeing. There's too much cell phone use among kids. I go hiking. I see these parents with 3-year-olds, and the 3-year-olds on the phone, or the parents blaring rap music on their cell phone with the 3-year-old sitting there. Yeah. And you just think about, there's no way this parent is going to voluntarily stop doing this. Right. You've got to find some way to legislate out and enforce the legislation.
Right. the thing that breaks my heart is I go to the grocery store and I see, a mother with her kids, and the kids are asking for this, that, and whatever. They get whatever they want, and it's nothing that's good for them.
Yeah.
Take the time to read the labels.
Yeah.
Take the time to think, how am I impacting my kid?
Yeah.
As that kid, for the first time in history, we've got children dying before their parents on obesity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does it take is my question, is what does it take to...
Well, parents have to stop thinking the kid's going to be their best friend. The kid, as the kid gets older, he can become the parent's friend, but the kid is not your parent. You're not meant to be your kid's best friend.
It's the responsibility that you brought into this world, and to give them the right the things that they need, the right skills that they need. You got to kind of get some tough love, is what you're really saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I agree with that. So I want to mention that you were in 2011. You won the award for the reader's favorite bronze level of education, and you did that with Bubble Boys.
I did.
Wow, that's amazing.
22 years old, 23 at that point.
Yeah,
22 when I wrote it, 23 when I won the award.
So if you have, and you've had so many things and that you've shared with us that are just pearls of wisdom. Mm-hmm. What's your pearl of wisdom today that you want to?
History is the greatest guide. It can do more for you than any individual teacher or any other subject, because it's all encompassing and it encapsulates every facet of human experience. And everybody has been through something before that you may be going through now, or that we as a society are going through now. And unless you study the record of past successes and failures, you're doomed forever to be a child intellectually. So with what I'm trying to do with Idols of History and the High Renaissance Italy, it's meant to be the greatest teacher you can possibly find. Not me, but the history itself. And I would encourage people to have fun with it. History doesn't have to be, these aren't all serious people, the way they teach it is these serious people doing these great actions and they're almost objects on a page. No. There are a lot of really fun characters. In the High Renaissance Italy volume, I go into Poggio Bracciolini, who blackmailed kings into paying him for translations he did for them, and who took a mistress when he was in his 70s. She was maybe 18. He was a wild character. Absolutely hysterical. He wrote a book called Facetiae, and I cover some of this in there. It's scandalous tales. Some of them are moral. Some of them are physical. It's not all serious. You don't have to take it all seriously, but you've got to at least put some effort into looking at it.
Right. Wow. Well, I'm going to commit myself to getting those books and definitely doing that. And
absolutely. And
taking at least a half hour a day to get through 30 pages. So I just thank you for the gift that you bring into our lives, and appreciate that. I know that the audience does too. How can I get in touch with you?
My blog on greatbooksdude.wordpress.com. There should be a contact box. You can email me, greatbooksdude@gmail.com. And the book is available on Amazon.
Okay.
So any of those are fine.
Great. Well, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, really, for being our guest today here on WBTVN's Expert Spotlight Show. And I definitely want to thank our viewers today, too. And until next week, we will see you then. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.